But we begin with two judges ruling that the Trump administration must use emergency funds to pay for food assistance. CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson broke down the decisions and what they mean for SNAP recipients in the short term.
We should remind everybody that these are temporary restraining orders, meaning this is not a final ruling on the merit. Both judges are looking at who's likely to succeed, where there will be an irreparable risk of harm if you do or don't grant this emergency relief. And what we're seeing is, in one case, the judge is saying, federal government, I think you need to pay, let me know by Monday. In another case, a judge is saying something very similar, which is you need to pay, essentially tell me by Monday that you did. But both of them globally reaching the same conclusion. These trial court rulings indicate that the 1 in 8 Americans who rely on these benefits should be able to get at least partial benefits. Having said that, we know these rulings will be appealed. So what we need to look at in the next hours is whether these temporary restraining orders, or in one case, almost granting the temporary restraining order, whether or not they're paused while the cases are appealed. That could mean people will not get benefits, at least for a temporary period of time.
Let's bring in CBS News White House reporter Willie. James Inman following the president in West Palm Beach, Florida. So, Willie, how is the White House reacting to these rulings on SNAP?
Hey there, good to be with you on this Friday, Lindsay, and happy Halloween to you. Well, the administration seemingly acknowledging these judges and their rulings, essentially compelling the Trump administration to find a way to at least partially pay for some of these SNAP benefits that millions of Americans rely on. In fact, the White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett was on a different network earlier today. He was on Fox News, and he said, we're about to use emergency funds from the Department of Agriculture because of a liberal judge ruling that we disagree in the law on. And then he then goes on to say, we don't have our emergency funds in case we have a hurricane or we have an emergency or a food emergency, acknowledging the billions of dollars, $5 billion to be exact, in the emergency funding set aside within the Department of Agriculture, who essentially could use these funds potentially to pay out some of those SNAP benefits amid this ongoing government shutdown that really shows no signs of going away. Of course, we know that many federal employees are going without paychecks, but on top of that, you have now the federal assistance at least running out over this weekend. So now some states have stepped up and are essentially filling the gap when it comes to that federal assistance, but in large part, these states rely on the federal government to provide those funds for these millions of Americans around the country to be able to put food on the table. Lindsay.
We know that President Trump wants Senate Republicans to get rid of the filibuster to end the shutdown. What's his argument? What's the response from top Republicans?
Yeah, so his argument is essentially that they can bypass Senate Democrats because you need the 60 votes to be able to move legislation forward. That is why legislation is stuck for right now, stuck in the Senate, and that is not moving forward because you need a handful of Democrats to vote with Republicans. Republicans don't have that supermajority of 60 votes in the Senate. So the president is calling for the Trump card, using his words there in a Truth Social post, for the Senate Republicans to get rid of the filibuster. And now we have seen top Republican, at least John Thune, the majority leader of the Senate, of the Republicans, saying through a spokesperson that there's no policy change in terms of the filibuster. In fact, earlier this year, he noted that the Senate would not become like the lower chamber, the House of Representatives, where in large part it just requires a simple majority for legislation to pass. That is not what happens in the Senate. The Senate is unique, and he noted that the Founding Fathers intended the Senate to be unique, and with that filibuster procedural hurdle where you need some buy-in from the minority party to move legislation forward. So it appears that is unlikely to happen, even though the president is trying to compel Senate Republicans to move forward with this legislation to fund the government shutdown, to fund the government, I should say, and end the shutdown. Lindsay?
James Inman, thank you.